Most arguments look like fights over truth, facts versus facts, evidence versus evidence. But that's rarely what's actually happening. Most arguments aren't about what is true. They're about what words are allowed to mean. Because once definitions are fixed, the conclusion is already decided. People don't argue to discover truth. They argue to defend a framework they're already standing inside. Semantics is the study of meaning, not morality, not correctness. Meaning, two people can use the same word, say freedom, respect, or fairness, and mean entirely different things. They hear each other clearly. They just aren't speaking the same language. Words feel neutral, but they aren't. They're containers. And whoever controls the container controls what ideas can exist inside it. Facts only function inside definitions. Before you can argue about justice, you must agree on what justice is. Before you can argue about safety, you must agree on what counts as harm. If two people disagree on definitions, facts don't resolve the argument. They ricochet off it. That's why debates feel endless. They aren't stalled by ignorance. They're stalled by incompatible meanings. Not truth versus lies. Framework versus framework. This is why power doesn't start by arguing facts. It starts by defining terms. If surveillance is defined as security, resistance sounds reckless. If dissent is defined as instability, control feels responsible. If obedience is framed as normal, non-compliance becomes deviant. Notice what's happening. The argument is already won before any policy is debated, because once words are framed, choices shrink. You don't need to silence opposition if the language makes it sound unreasonable. This doesn't just happen in governments. It happens in everyday relationships. When someone says, "You're being disrespectful," what do they mean? Disagreement? Tone? Loss of control? When someone says, "I need space," do they mean reflection or withdrawal? Most relational conflicts don't escalate because of actions. They escalate because definitions were never shared. One person thinks honesty means bluntness. The other thinks it means care. Neither is lying. They're defending different meanings. People don't defend definitions calmly, because definitions organize identity. They tell you who you are, what's acceptable. What counts as failure to challenge a definition is to threaten someone's internal map of reality. That's why arguments get emotional fast. Not because truth is at stake, but because meaning is. Okay? And losing meaning feels like losing control. Here's what semantic control does. First, it freezes thought. Words can't be redefined. Ideas can't evolve. Second, it disguises power. Control hides behind just words. But words decide. What's sayable? What's punishable? What's invisible? When language hardens, thinking follows. Once you understand semantics, arguments change. You stop asking who's right and start asking, what do these words mean here and why? Most arguments aren't about truth. They're about definitions. Until definitions are examined, no amount of facts will ever settle the fight. Control the words, and you control the argument.